I'd like for you guys to welcome Ken on up. He's going to share a little bit about the service and what's going to take place.
All right. Just thanks. It's so evident that Megan and I could have never walked through this without people carrying us. If there's a way to say thanks, so just from the bottom of our heart, we are so thankful. I'm going to set up just what this is going to look like. It'll probably be different than maybe a traditional service, and everything's really intentional. And I'd say the focus of today is healing. And so we're going to do things that we feel like are really healing for our family, and we invite you to. We know everyone's been carrying a lot of burdens with us, and so that's the hope. I'd say the biggest thing is to permission to be where you're at. One of the best pieces of advice we got from some friends that lost a child a few years ago was just to be present with the emotion, not to manufacture it, not to force it, and we don't get to control. Some days we're full of joy and you feel like, man, maybe I should really be deeply sorrowful, or like I can't get out of this funk. And trying to force that or change that has been really unhelpful in the days that we've chosen to be present. So wherever you're at today, we just encourage you to be who you are and where you're at in this. And you don't owe us anything. Your presence is what's supporting us, and we're just so grateful that you're here with us. And it's not disrespectful or dishonoring for you to be wherever you're at, whether that's full of joy or full of sorrow or anywhere in the between. And we're going to celebrate and we're going to lament. We're going to do both while we're here. So you'll probably hear we have a really diverse group of people here, and Megan and I love that. That's like our family and friends is super diverse. And so just so we're all on the same page, you're going to hear some people say Yeshua, you're going to hear some people say Jesus. We're talking about the same person, the Son of God. So that's all saying that. You know, one of the hardest things that Megan and I tried to, or have been reconciling, is that most people never got to meet Talia. And that was really intentional. And if we could do it all over again, we wouldn't have changed that. With her gastroschisis and her organs being external, one of the highest threats to her survival was contamination or any kind of bacteria. And so one of the things the doctors made very clear was the less exposure, the higher her chance of survival. And so if we could influence that by 1%, we were going to do it. And she didn't survive. And so then there's this piece of like, man, we wish everyone could have got to meet her, but we wouldn't have taken that back. So we're sorry that you didn't. Hopefully today you'll get to experience a little bit of who she was, the incredible little girl that she was. So, you know, as I thought about this, I thought today's not about, it's remembering Talia, but it's not for her. Like, she's not here. It's really for us. Like, today is about our healing, and it's about us having perspective of life and the fragileness, the specialness, the resilience of who we are as humans. It's like a great giant bucket of cold water being thrown in your face. It's a great wake-up call that what we do matters, that every moment we invest into other people or into something, whether it's good or bad, it matters, and it's the only moment we have. And so I hope that as you go through today, that you would have time to just reflect on your own life, and just to remember that like it's precious and it's sacred, and to not take moments for granted, and to be present with everything that you can be present with. And someday we will all die. It will come to an end. And I think remembering that's really important. I think it's really, really important. And I'm gonna read a couple verses from the Bible today as I talk now and later. And I feel like it's powerful in of itself. So I'm just going to read Matthew 10. It says, "And do not fear those that kill the body but are unable to kill the being, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both the body and the being. And are 2 sparrows not sold for a copper coin, and not one of them falls to the ground without your Father, and even the hairs of your head are numbered. So do not fear, you are worth more than many sparrows. Everyone therefore who shall confess me before men, him I shall also confess before my Father who is in the heavens. But whoever shall deny me before men, him I shall also deny before my Father who is in the heavens." And then he goes on later to say that He was found his life shall lose it, and he that has lost his life for my sake shall find it. He who receives you receives me, and he who receives me receives him who sent me. And it was just so present that you are an eternal being, and Talia was too. There was so much more to her before Megan even had her. There was a piece of her identity and who she was that was created at the beginning of earth and is still alive today, and we believe living with Jesus in heaven right now. And yeah, just say what you do matters. I won't. I was going to say something about Sabbath, but today, as far as me and Megan know, the seventh day is Saturday, and so we celebrate Sabbath on Saturday, but I just felt like that was really intentional today, it was a nice surprise to remember that today's a day of rest, so I hope that you guys find rest in the worship and the things that we're talking about. We invite you into rest. And so I'm going to bring Adam up, who's a really good friend of mine. We get to hang out almost weekly, and we have been for many years, and he's just got a really close look at me and Megan's marriage and our life, a really intimate view in that. Nothing has been held back, and he's going to lead us in worship, which Megan and I have found to be the one kind of the sledgehammer to bring us together. When everything else is falling apart and we don't know what to do, we kind of take a posture of lamenting. And for us, that's the ability to talk about how terrible a situation is, to be radically vulnerable with how much something is just killing us, and at the same time to still declare how good God is. And to us, that's what lament is. It's holding both. It's being able to just cry out and to declare who he is, and there's something that's healing for the soul. And so as we worship, that's what we'll be doing, and we just invite you into that.
As we come to worship, what I do know is not having had the chance to meet Talia, I know who she comes from, and indeed, one who provides access and dew from heaven. I know the two of you, and I know your love and your belief and your hope, and so that's the only reason I'm able to keep doing this today. Just wanting to, probably if it was my choice, I would want to just sit with y'all and tear my clothes and weep. And I'm so honored that what y'all wanted was to worship today. And so let's do that. And what often I think can happen, at least for me, is as we come to worship, it can feel like I have to kind of run my own heart over to sing these songs, have to sort of stick my head in the sand. As Ken mentioned, and I would just reiterate, you're not being asked to stick your head in the sand this morning to be able to sing these songs. There's going to be things that we sing that you're going to go, golly, how could you sing that right now? And it's probably the precise moment to just offer however it is that we feel to him this morning, and hold both joy and sorrow with Ken and Megan and with Cadence this morning.
In mid-February, we were expecting our second child, and on January 12th, we got a surprise as Megan went into labor. We didn't think it was labor at the time. We thought it was Braxton Hicks contractions, and Megan was acting like they're no big deal. Megan took a bath, and we thought, hey, just relax, these will go away. And at some point, they were a few minutes apart, and we thought we should just get to the hospital just to check it out. So we hopped in the car and headed into the hospital, and we thought we were gonna go in, they were gonna tell us, yep, these are Braxton Hicks contractions, we'll see you in 6 weeks, have a great night, get some rest. And it was right about the moment that we walked in and when they put Megan on the table or on the bed, and that's when everything kind of changed.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we were just going in, and I just thought, my midwife said they might be able to give me some stop contractions if they were contractions, and then we came in and she checked me and she's like, you're 8 centimeters dilated, like you're gonna have this baby really soon. And so everything from that moment on, it just happened so fast.
In an instant, just our whole world started changing, and it stayed that way for about 6 weeks. We thought we were gonna have our baby at home, that was the plan, but because she was 5 weeks early, and she was already 8 centimeters, we ended up having in the hospital. And the baby's coming out, and I'm catching it, and they're like, all right, Dad, is it a boy or a girl? And I'm looking at her and I'm like, it's a girl. And so now we have 2 girls, and at the same time, like, everything already is moving into this state of emergency because we're at the hospital, and within an hour later we have another baby. And as I'm looking to see the gender, I see something's different, like something's dramatically wrong. And our daughter, she had what's called gastroschisis, and her intestines and liver and gallbladder and a lot of her lower organs were actually external to her body. Her abdominal wall never closed fully in utero. And she comes out and she's not breathing, and you see the most innocent thing in the world in the most helpless place. And I just looked at the doctor and I just said, is this recoverable? Megan didn't even know. Megan didn't see.
I didn't see anything because right when she came out and they saw everything, they're like, you need to cut the cord. So they just cut the cord and they took her right away. So I never got to see her at all.
Yeah. So the doctors rushed in, grab our daughter, they throw her on another table, and the first concern is they're trying to get her to breathe. And at that point we find out we're gonna be going flight for life into Denver. Every moment we're like, is this the last moment we're gonna see our new daughter? And I just felt like it was so important to get our other daughter to meet her little baby sister. And so the hospital let me bring her back right before we got on flight for life. And our daughter's 2, and she comes in and she's so excited. She didn't know if it was gonna be a baby boy or a baby girl, and she found out she was having a sister, and she was just thrilled beyond belief. So we bring her back, wash her down, get her ready, and the beauty of our daughter and just children is the innocence. Like, she runs in and she doesn't see anything wrong. She's my sissy, and she's like scrambling to touch her sister. And I'm holding her, and she reaches down and she grabs her sister's hand, and her sister is intubated, and tubes everywhere, and her eyes are closed, and our new daughter, she's hanging on to Cadence, our 2-year-old's hand, and I'm holding Cadence here, and she's holding her hand, and Cadence looks up at me, and she lets go of her hand. She says, "Daddy, it's my sister." And as she pulls her hand back, our daughter's eyes are closed, like barely alive. She reaches up and she grabs her sister's hand and she pulls it in. And it was like the most precious moment of her life. Like, she never did that ever again. She never had that much movement, and just the connection between her and Cadence was incredible. And from there, we get into the incubator. She stops breathing. They have a complication with the tube. She flatlines again. They get her back to life. That happened about 3 times through the journey. And me and our new daughter flight for life into Denver. Meanwhile, Megan is in another ambulance, and she's getting transported up to Denver for her complications. And so we still haven't seen each other. We're transported in two different ways up to Denver, and I get into the hospital, and they're going to do an emergency surgery to try to see if they can get the gastroschisis, basically get her organs back into her stomach, and then they start the surgery. And so then at that point, Megan arrives at the same hospital, and I go into the room that she's in, and we just start praying, and it was mostly weeping, if we're honest. It was just like groanings to God and trusting at the same time, and it was a very long time. And it was, again, are we going to lose our daughter? There was this theme that was offered on the table every day for us. 3 hours later, surgery's done. She survives it, but it was just it felt like an onset of bad news being delivered pretty frequently. And so the goal was to get all of her organs back in. And worst case scenario, they'd only get part of them back in. And the doctor came in and said, hey, we actually weren't able to get anything back in. But they contained them in a sanitary bag container and called a silo. And at that moment, we're not really knowing what's going to happen. The next day, we meet with the main doctor on the floor, and he tells me, hey, I just want you to know, we're gonna Our average for this type of stay is about 62 days, short as 1 month, long as 6 months. And that's when things started really setting in even in heavier ways. We thought we were going to be in the hospital for 5 minutes. They were going to say, hey, those are Braxton Hicks contractions, get out of here. And then it went to, oh, we're going to have labor, so we're going to be here for a few hours. Then it went to, now we're flight for life, we're going to be here for a day. We thought with the surgery, maybe we'll be there for like 5 days or something. And now we're here and we might be living in the NICU for 6 months. And I have to share this news with Megan, and it was just terrifying to know that I had to share with you, like, this is the situation we're in.
Yeah, I think the hardest part for me was just after learning everything that happened, and then when you go in to see her, just seeing her like with her organs like over her is obviously not a very good sight, and so just wondering like what that means like for the rest of her life basically. And so that's just kind of that was just the major feeling that I was just thinking is like I don't know what this means like long term and everything. So that's just kind of where we were.
Megan was in the hospital for 3 days. Everything, she bounced back, incredibly resilient, no long-term problems. And so then we move out of the hospital, we move into a new season of our lives. Our daughter ended up living for 35 days, and that time frame of her being in the NICU was just the most intense time of our lives. And then now we're in this, everything stopped in our life, and what really happened is the rest of the world kept moving. Now we're like re-emerging back into society and trying to understand, like, what does it mean to how do we process with our daughter that her sister's no longer alive? How do we go back to our normal lives? How do we keep pursuing life? How do we choose life instead of death every morning? Because right now it's a real fight, and and this last year and a half has been a tough year for us.
Yeah, just a little over a year ago, I lost my dad in a really bad way, and then now just losing a daughter, so like a parent and a kid, like within a year and a half, it's just a lot. So we're just trying to figure out kind of how to process that and what that looks like and walk through that in a healthy way. Yeah,
and then on top of that, all of a sudden, like, our mailbox is flooded with all these bills. The story behind it was we had really good insurance, and they would cover almost all of Megan's stuff. But there's this unique clause that only covers $150,000 for congenital disorders. And so the people at the hospital while we were in the NICU would come in and talk to us every other day or so, and they're trying to get all their stuff. And I walk in and I'm thinking, oh man, like this is really intense, but we're covered. Like it's okay. Like we got this extra, all of Megan's stuff's taken care of. We got this extra $150,000. And I'm thinking that's got to at least get us a few days. And the finance lady came and talked to me the first 10 hours we were in the hospital after surgery. She comes talks to me. She says, "Hey, we got to get these extra coverages." And she's like, "It doesn't matter what coverage you get, we're gonna max it out." She's like, "This is the most expensive place you could be in the planet." The numbers are hard to fathom. Like it could be between 15 to 25 million. It's not even. Yeah, that's a hard number. We're trying to process kind of this financial strain, along with like what's most important is the emotional healing for our family, and just to continue to pursue life. And so we're just thankful for anything that you consider, for your prayers, for your love, and for financial support. And we can't say thank you enough.
Wow. Kind of get to experience a little bit of the gravity of the situation. At the very end, you understand the financial burden is extreme, and it's way out there. And so even sharing this today and presenting their video, I got to say to Ken a minute ago, unapologetically, I would stand up here and say, would you guys help them in any way that you could to help them get through this next season of their life with insurmountable things going on, believing that community and friends and family can at least help process and get through that part of the journey. That would be huge.
I just feel like I'm going to explode up here. I was like, whew. Thanks for being present with us. It carries so much weight. So much weight. I start by just saying, as a family, me and Megan spend a lot of time saying, who are we as a family? And our family mantra is that we will not let our circumstances dictate our response. That's the banner that we've chosen to put over our lives, that we feel like God said, this is who you are, and this is what you need to hang on to, what's most true about you. And there were a lot of circumstances that happened. And it tried to shake the foundation of everything that Megan and I believe in, that we hold on to. And we had a daily conversation. And that conversation always was, first, really a recognition that we're not in control of very much at all in life. The only thing that we were in control of this whole time was our response. So every morning we'd get up, and we would just kind of just re-speak that over ourselves, like, okay, today we're not in control of this circumstance. Like, the only thing we're in control of is our response, no matter what news happens. And there was a lot of news that came to us. There's a lot of news, and I'm just like the proudest man alive to see a woman of complete power, like, hang on to hope every day when everything is being ripped from you. And every day you did it. And it was incredible. Between you and Cadence and Talia, there's no words. To us as a family, identity is really important. So we hang on to that. Like Megan's identity is she's the pearl of Yahweh's affection. She represents complete beauty and complete affection, but she's silent and captivating in of herself. One of the pieces of my identity that I get up and I speak to myself every day says, my anchor is tethered to the heavens, unshakable, unsinkable, royally resilient. And all I can tell you is we had, people are like, hey, like, a lot of good things were spoken over us today. And radically humbling, and without a doubt, it's so evident to know what our capacity is, and to know that this is so much beyond us. Like, the only thing good that you may be seeing in us is Yeshua in us, and I don't know what else to say. Like, it's just really obvious. Like, if I was a weightlifter and I knew my max was 120, and then one day I really pushed hard and say I got up to 150, I might think that's me. But if one day I went and bench pressed 900 pounds, it would be really evident that's not me. And that's kind of what this feels like. Some days are completely debilitating, but we would not be here without Yeshua's presence in our life. And I just, say that unapologetically. I want to tell you guys about Talia. It's one of the biggest things that I want to share. When Megan was pregnant, we didn't know what the gender was, and so we just started praying, like, God, like, tell us who this eternal being is that you're knitting together in Megan's womb. And the first word that we got was that we would have a second child, and that they would be non-disruptive to our family. It's funny, as Megan got pregnant, and both times, people always have a lot of advice they want to give you about children, and typically it's like all the things that aren't good, like you're not going to sleep and all this, and wait till you have a second child. And me and Megan have just, like, always, we just took the posture of, like, God said children are a blessing, and, like, that's it. There's nothing more. And so we would stand on that, and we'd pray, like, what is this blessing you're going to give us? And the first word we got was, this child will not be disruptive to your life. I don't know how much you guys believe in the spiritual realms, and if you believe that you really have an enemy that's coming for you, and that you also have people and a father that's fighting for you. And every day there was a big invitation coming for us in lots of different ways, trying to get us to partner with death. And sometimes when Satan comes after you, it's so evident, it's kind of easier to dismantle. So, the first thing that came up is, like, non-disruptive. Your father's a liar. Like, back to Satan being the accuser from the very beginning of the garden, right? Like God's holding out on you. And so that's the first thing came so loud and clear, is like, is your father God? Like, he's a liar, non-disruptive. Your life is in shambles. And thankfully, there were a lot of other things that definitely pulled on us, but that one was like almost easy to dismantle because it was so evident of what was going on. And the truth was, like, there was nothing disruptive but anchoring in Talia's life. Me and Megan have never had so much unity ever as those 35 days. We were like bonded together like a steel fortress. It was, so as that came every day, it was like, yeah, our physical circumstances aren't awesome. Our family has never been more united than it ever has. I mean, in the most powerful way. It was incredible. It was incredible. The second thing that was part of Talia's identity as we were praying for her in the womb was that she would really partner with Cadence. And we didn't know if it was going to be a boy or a girl, but that this next child would really submit to the authority of Cadence being the older child, and that they would partner together. And we saw just some really incredible connections between the two of them, and it was so evident. And it's going to be a really fun journey to watch how Cadence walks out her relationship with her sister afar. And then the last thing that we heard over Talia, and I'm just sharing this so you guys know who she is, was that she'd be a silent warrior. She never got a chance to say one word. She never used her voice once. And it was so evident that she was a silent warrior. And these are words that we got months before she was born. And we were pressing into that. Like, what does that mean? And the only thing we could kind of get to is like a samurai ninja, that she was lethal but silent. And that ties really well to her sister. There was like this bonding between the two of them that we also heard about her. And our last name, Kelly, means warrior. And we didn't even find that out until we started doing some stuff with Cadence. But she's a silent warrior, and it was so evident. I think of St. Francis of Assisi says, preach the word of God every single day, and if necessary, use words. And I feel like in that hospital room, that's what Talia did every day with her actions, her interactions with our family and friends and the staff were incredible. And she just changed lives. And it's really hard to fathom, like, how in 35 days someone could make an impact, especially without using words. And it calls me to rise up and to think about, like, what does it look like to live through action and not through words? And it's such a great partnering with Cadence. Cadence's identity is, the thing over her was that she was going to be this warrior that was going to, like the word on it was from Psalms, and it talks about a mighty man who takes down a city by its strongholds. And so Cadence wasn't going to use brute force in her warrior, but it was more through intelligence. And we've seen that play out already in massive ways. So we have two daughters that are two warriors, and they kind of play on each other. Talia's name, it took us, as everyone know, the most frequently asked question of Talia's life was, what is her name? And when I was going through each, because we're in multiple hospitals and the Flight for Life, everyone's like, what's her name? What's her name? And I'm like, it took us 2 weeks to name our daughter that was 42 weeks, like a few weeks late. This one's 5 weeks early. I forgot we were pregnant. And every time someone asked me, all I could hear in the back of my mind, like audibly, was like, river, river, river. And so me and Megan started talking about that. Like, what does that mean? And Talia's name, so Talyah Kascade, Talia means dew from heaven or dew from Yahweh, which is the life substance, the water, the nourishment from God. And then a cascade is a mighty rushing river that cascades into a waterfall. It's the point in the river where it moves the fastest, but it's the most beautiful. And Talia came out fast. She was beautiful. She was an oasis. And the word, as we started praying about river, was she's one that will provide access. She'll provide access to the source of life. The problem with church is humans, right? The problem with everything in the world is we're the ones that mess it up. And the word over Talia was that she was going to make a way to the source of life. She was going to take away all the man-made burdens that we put in the way that get to God. And she was actually going to bring God's presence downstream so people could have easy access to it without having to jump over the hurdles that we've created. And we didn't know what that meant at first, but now it's so evident. So many people regardless of what they believe, have told us how much they've been touched by God, by her story, or by being in her presence, or whatever that may have been. So it's just incredible to watch that play out. As you heard a couple people say, me and Megan, we kind of rally every morning before she would head off to the hospital, and the other thing that we'd say is like, are we going to partner with life, or are we going to partner with death? Like that's our choice today. And so we just kind of spoke over ourselves. We're like, we'd kind of rally ourselves up. Like, today we're partnering with life. Like, that's what we're going to choose. And like Josh said, there was a lot of the doctors really, I think they just thought we were just as naive could be. Like, they like, you're going to lose, like, you're going to lose your daughter in the next few hours. Like, you need to, and I would say, like, I understand what you're saying. And as her father, I'm just going to believe for the best. And then they would kind of get in my face and say, like, no, you don't understand. And at one point, 3 or 4 weeks into it, there was a very big discussion about, we need to pull her off of life support. And they gave us all the reasons why and how this is humane. And me and Megan just kept, we had to ask. I mean, it was a high invitation, because as a parent, you never want your kids to be in pain. So anything you can do to end that pain is the first thing you'd want to do. And it was a 5-hour conversation. And we were on this place of like, are we going to do that or not? And we said, there's not a machine that's keeping her heart going. We believe every breath comes from God, every heartbeat comes from God, and we're just not gonna do that. We're gonna partner with life. We're gonna believe that what God said is true, and so that was our mantra. And what we found in that is that our culture is not comfortable with pain. Like, there's a reason we have an opioid addiction crisis. Like, we stub our toe and we take an Advil. Like, and emotional pain we are super not comfortable with. So the more that people saw that we were willing to go the long haul, the more there was like this invitation, this pull to say, like, and it was always out of love. That was the interesting thing. I think I'm just sharing just stuff that changed me and Megan is really what I'm sharing right now. It's how Talia changed us. But we just recognized, like, we are not comfortable with pain at all as a society. And the most loving thing we can do is to pull people out of pain. And what we realized in that process is that it was actually a really beautiful thing, and it was needed. And Cadence has never had a needle in her body ever. She's never, like, anything. Talia had over, like, I think it was like over 200 like deep pokes into her skin, like cuts where they would drain blood. And that was like brutal to watch a little infant and to watch her try to cry, but her voice, her tubes were open because of the ventilators. And to say, like, we're going to keep doing that every day and watch them, move her stomach and watch her be in pain. Are we willing to do that? And we said, yeah, like, if it means that she could survive, like, we're going to stay. I'm going to be weeping, holding her hand while they do that, and just tell her how strong she is. And yeah, and so I think me and Megan have a new appreciation for pain and its purpose. The other thing that was really evident as Talia passed away in my arms is that death is a shadow. It's a shadow, meaning it's just an illusion. It has this big scary thing with it, but really, like, if you're an eternal being, it's just a stamp in a much bigger timeline. It's just a mile marker, and this became present. I just started thinking about, like, what is life? And science would say life is just energy. It would say that, like, even what you're seeing now of me, it's just your eye's perception and forming energy. And if you looked away, I would just be a bunch of vibrating cells, and I wouldn't actually be clothes and skin and all this stuff. And really the only thing that's true about us is just this form of energy. And I was like thinking about that. I was like, what? Like, and I was like, that's science's way of kind of explaining our soul, this peace that's always eternal, the life that's in us. And I thought about life just has different seasons, and we kind of put priority on one or the other, and we really look at death as this mile marker, but the question is which is it? And so I was thinking about just wood. So this probably sounds weird, but like a seed. So you have a seed becomes fruit, the fruit becomes a tree, the tree dies, it becomes a branch. You put the branch in the fire, the branch becomes a flame. And so the question is what was it? Was it a seed, a fruit, a tree, a branch, or a flame? What it was is its energy. And I don't think fruit has souls, but it was its soul. That was the one thing that was constant in wherever it was at. And And that's who we are. And so there's not a moment that me and Megan will not think about Talia and wish that we could hold her again. And we know that she's alive. And we know that death is not, maybe not what we thought it was. My favorite rapper says, everyone dies, but not everyone lives. And so that was my invitation this morning, was just like how to make the most of those, how to make the most of every moment, because we don't know. We'll have plans. We never plan to die, but it will happen. And so how to make the most of every breath. I'd spend a lot of time at the hospital. Megan and I both would. A quick rundown of our schedule is like, I would wake up about 9:30, and Megan would walk out the door. She'd go to the hospital till the afternoon. She'd come home. We'd high five. She'd take care of Cadence. I would head to the hospital till dinner, come home for 2.5 hours, put Cadence to bed, dinner, give her a bath, literally lay her down, kiss Megan, walk out the door, back in the hospital at 9, stay there till about 3 or 4 in the morning, come home, sleep, wake up, and do that whole thing over. And those late night hours where I spent a lot of time in the hospital, you get in some really philosophical question. Like the people that are visiting are asking us like just hard questions. The doctors, the staff too, and I had a lot of people tell me like this breaks God's heart. Like God is really mad about this. Like this shouldn't be. Like He's really mad about this. And I don't know where I sit on this fully, but I just kind of invite you in my process of like, and I think it was a really long conversation me and Chris had. And I was like, I don't know if He's mad about it. And that's like, that feels scandalous to say. But one thing became very clear is sitting in those moments and just watching miracles happen was we say we know God's a lot bigger than us, but a lot of times I think that we try to think we can understand God with our mind. And it's like, as humans, the best scientists in the world can't explain exactly how an eye works, let alone that there's a billion galaxies and we're just in one galaxy. So if God's that big, there's the gap of who God is and who we are is so big. The more I pressed into Talia's life and losing her, the more I just realized I don't know if I fully understand love. Like God is pure love, and I don't know that He's mad at this. Like when we watch Cadence cry because she's going through a really hard time and we know that it's for her good, we're able to both bear her pain and to have joy in who she's becoming as a little girl. And I don't know. I just felt God's love in this in a way that feels unimaginable. This is a book, Megan, this is a quote from a book that Megan wrote, and I loved it. I thought it was part of it. She says, "What appears to be tragic could bring more good than you could imagine. Praising Him despite what is happening creates an energy that draws His power and wisdom towards you, giving what you need when you need it. Praising attracts breakthrough." And so that's what we stood with. And I do believe that God tenderly heart was broken for us as His children, but I don't know. I just don't think He was mad about it. I don't think He's a mad God. And just I don't know. I'm kind of processing like what I think about God has changed. So Talia's strength, people mentioned her strength, like some things to know about her when they say, I just want to put context on it. Like when people say she was a warrior, innumerable amount of doctors saying she should not be here. The longest that we ever went without someone telling us that Talia was going to die that same day was a 3-day period. Usually it was a daily. And she was alive for 35 days. And they kept saying like and that was kind of hard for us because we'd prepare every day, like, okay, we have to be ready for this, but we're going to believe. And so we watched her just accomplish a bunch of miracles. I witnessed her flatline 6 times. So I feel like a parent should never have to see their children do that once. But there was something in her that just kept going. In the end, when she was dying in my arms and Megan was there, we were holding her, her heart stopped over 10 times. We stopped counting after 10 times. Like she was, like this was like all of her vital signs had completely, like most of her organs completely stopped not like functioning. And she was supposed to die. And we'd watch it and watch her heartbeat slow down, and then get to nothing. And then me and Megan would just kind of like accept it and then it would like jump back up. And like when I say back up, like back up to 80 to 100 beats a minute. And we did that for hours. And it was crazy. So there was something in her that was resilient, and it felt like she was hanging on for us, honestly. Like she could have checked out really early. Her favorite thing was Megan's milk. We got to give her a drop of it every 4 hours. And she would smile, and it was really I think her greatest pleasure, if she had a pleasure, it was Megan's milk. And I just felt like as her spirit, she was someone that laughed in the face of death. In the end, we got a call. We got one of many calls we didn't want to get. I just got home from the hospital a couple hours later, was sleeping, and they said, "Ken, you need to come in right away. Your daughter may only be here for an hour." And so rushed in. That was on a Monday, and they're like, she is going to pass away in the next couple hours. And so they're like, but we want you to move into this room. And they sent us to the room where people go to die. So in the whole NICU, there's a bunch of rooms. None of them have beds. So you have to leave. That's probably the hardest thing, I think, as a parent that has carried a child with like some sort of physical sickness is, we never got to hold her. Never got to be in the house with her. Cadence was 11 months before she was in a different bedroom than Megan. I mean, like a different room in her entire life. She was never not in the same 10 feet as us for the first 11 months of her life. And we never spent a night together with Talia until the end. So they send us to this room, and what I'm telling you about this room is it has a bed. And so that was kind of this like beautiful thing about it. Is like, we're moving into this room, it's private, you can be with your daughter while she passes away, and there's a bed there. If she ends up living for a night, then you can sleep here or whatever. And so they moved us into this room, and when we were in that room, it was so evident, like, this is what it looks like to walk in the valley of the shadow of death. Again, it's a shadow, but to walk in it, to be in a place where like the only reason you're there is for death. And we prayed, and we believed, and we hoped that our story would be, they sent us to the place where people go to die, and we walked out of there with our daughter. And that wasn't our story. And it didn't change anything that God said. And there was a lot of grace in it. So she was supposed to last for a few hours, and we were in that room where they sent people to die for 6 days. And the doctor kept telling me, "Ken, you need to go. You cannot sleep here again." And I was like, you send me to the room where people go to die, and there's a bed. I am not leaving. Like, that was a mistake. You should not have sent us here. And the really cool thing is NICUs can't have children under 14 in them because of contamination reasons. So Cadence never got to see her sister except for right before I jumped in the flight for life. Because we were in this private room, there was a back door to the hospital, we got to bring Cadence in. And so Cadence got 2 or 3 days where she got to come in and see her sister. And it was an incredible blessing to get to be in that room, for Cadence to get to interact with her sister. Yeah. I just say this, I feel like this was like, just to put some perspective on it, you guys probably know the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Nebuchadnezzar was the king of the time, made a gold altar, told everyone that when any of the musical instruments blow, to get on your knees, bow down and worship this gold altar. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said no, so they're brought to the king. The king says, "If you don't do this, I'm going to throw you in the fiery furnace." And their response was incredible. And they said, "O sovereign Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. For if so, our God, who we serve, is able to deliver us from the burning furnace of fire and from your hand, O sovereign. He does deliver. But if he does not, let it be known to you, sovereign, that we do not serve your false god, nor do we bow to the gold image which you have set up." And that's identity. Like that's identity, of course, knowing who God is and who they were. And that's what we were offered every day at the hospital, was like accept death. And our prayer was never to control God. Especially in the end, we just put our hands on Talia and we just say, like, "God, we know that we know that you can bring her to life fully. And if you choose not to, we still know that you're good." And we had to say that to ourselves. We had to call ourselves up because everything in us was saying the opposite. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego get out of the fire. They don't not a burn. But the thing that was interesting is Yeshua was in the fire with them, and we were never alone. In the darkest moments, we were never alone, and it was so evident. And again, that's the only reason that we got through it. I appreciate you guys' time and walking with me within this. This is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, and but all these things are things I prayed about that I felt like God said is important to share. So a lot of people had visions of Talia, and when I say visions, I'm talking about visions of her later on in life. I personally had a vision that was so real. It was more than a movie. It was like looking at Cadence right now. And it was Talia running ahead of Cadence and pulling her, and Cadence just laughing. And she was about 2, and Cadence was 4. And those were some of the things that we held on to. We had lots of people that had visions of Talia when she was 18, and when she was 12, and when she was 25, and like all this stuff. And I spent a lot of time talking with God about what does it mean to hear your voice. And what do we do? What do we do as a community with these visions that we saw? Because they're not happening on this side of Earth. And I felt like he said a couple things like so clearly. He said, first, never stop listening, never stop trying, never stop encouraging. Like sometimes maybe it's your heart, sometimes it's directly from God, but never stop. Like just keep taking steps forward, keep trying to hear his voice. The other thing that I learned in that was when we're listening to God, because I feel like it's such an important thing to do, is like I think we spend too much time in our own mind instead of asking God, like, what do you see in this situation? But the best filter that I got, and me and Chris had a long conversation about this, and it came to, because sometimes you can see some like really bad stuff on people, and then you tell it and you kind of shame them to Sunday because you're like, oh, that person's really depressed, and hey, God, I could see this in you. Elliot, you're like really depressed. Is all going, can I pray for you in that? And that's actually not helpful at all. Maybe God's showing you that. So God's showing you something. The question is what am I supposed to do with this? Right? Like if we see something, like our question we should ask before we open our mouths, I think a lot of times we think that when God tells us something, that it's our job to go tell it to someone else. But maybe God is just telling us so that we have a specific assignment. So we can pray for that person or go do an action. And I think rarely is it actually to share it verbally. So I think the first question that he taught us in this is like, what is that? What's the purpose of that? And then the second one was, you'll never go wrong with like, what is love saying? Because I think sometimes we hear condemnation and judgment, and I don't believe that's God's voice at all. And so I think if you have those two filters, like, what's the purpose of you showing this to me, and what is love saying? I think you'll never go wrong. And that, for us, that's really critical because we can either walk away from this and think God's just a big liar and that vision was total BS, or we can keep listening and keep hearing. And as we do, we can kind of use those tools that I feel like God gave us during this time. We never, like I said in the beginning, like the thing that was most clear about Megan and I is the unity of our family had never been stronger than it ever was. And it was incredible. And one of the things, we're going to ask you guys all to pray for us. Elliot's going to lead us in prayer at the end, and we're going to ask for some prayer. But one of the things for us is, just as we come back, like it's living in the NICU, it's just like a different world. But every moment of that day, so I kind of gave you guys our schedule, there was like not a second in the day that was not incredibly purposeful. Every moment was dedicated to making sure Cadence had a normal life, to what she could, to loving Megan, to taking care of Talia, and that's all we did. I quit my job. Like everything stopped, and it's really weird. And we're walking back into this. I've been talking to Megan about it. Like I've never felt so purposeful in every moment of my life as in that time. And now coming out, I feel lost. Like nothing feels like it has purpose, like it did, except for Megan and Cadence. And so that's just something just to kind of, so many people have asked us like, how can they pray and stuff. And so that's the reason I share that, just as we kind of go back into that. And The other thing is just comparison. There's an invitation. Like, I feel like comparison is the thief of joy. Like, the hardest moments for us, we're just comparing. Like, if our expectation was everyone that has a second child loses it, like, it wouldn't have been that hard. It was just like, this is part of life and this is a normal thing. But we were comparing to what we think is the norm, and every time we did that, it took away our joy. Every time we watched another parent get to go into the NICU and pick up their child, because most children you can pick up in the NICU, it was like, well, that's not fair. Like, look at what they get to do. Well, look what we don't get to do. And every moment that was like just the thief of joy. And as I sat in that, I was starting thinking about, like, what are all the other things I have comparison in? And I was just thinking, like, I desire a different body, whether it's health or beauty or whatever that is, because I don't really see that I'm actually beautiful. I crave love from other people because I don't really love myself that well. I desire power because I don't know the power that's already in me. And, I think about Yeshua, and he didn't get caught in comparison. It says in Philippians 2, he said, make my joy complete by being the same mind, having the same love, one in being and purpose, doing nothing at all through selfishness or self-conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourself. Each one should not only look for his own interest, but also for the interest of others. For let the mind be in which was also in Messiah, who, being in the form of God, did not regard equality with Elohim a matter to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a servant, and came to be in the likeness of men. And having been found in the fashion of a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, death even to a cross. Therefore Elohim has highly exalted him and given him a name which is above all names. I think that's our model. And that's what me and Megan are running after. And so funny, as I'm saying all that, my mind's like, this is a mess, Ken. You're a lot of random thoughts. So we appreciate your love. I will leave you with this. We asked a lot of people to pray for us, to give us wisdom to tell Cadence what happened to her sister. Because even though Cadence is 2, she's brilliant. And when Megan was 3 months pregnant, she would go up to Megan somewhere and I'd say, baby, I love you, and kiss her. She was very aware that she was having a sibling, and she was aware when she was in the hospital, and she was going nuts over seeing her sister. And every day that we went to the hospital, she would say, Daddy, take me to see Sissy. And I'd have to tell her, I can't take you. So she knew that was never lost on her. And a few days after Talia passed, we had to sit down and tell her what happened. And it was so evident that Cadence is so much more mature than Megan and I, and that she actually understands that death is a shadow. We had told her she's not living here anymore. She's actually living with Yeshua in heaven. And Cadence, she's like trying to process. She's kind of thinking. She goes, heaven? Sissy's in heaven? And she's like jumping around. She's so excited. And me and Megan were just expecting the total opposite. We were just expecting her to be down and negative. And it was like, oh man, we don't really get this. Like, me and Megan have a lot to learn about being childlike. Like, we have a lot to learn about that. And Cadence modeled that for us. And she's been blowing our mind every day. Last week I was driving. I don't know where I was driving. Doesn't matter. And Cadence like, Daddy. And she's in the back seat. And she goes, Sissy's praying for me. And I was like, what'd you say? And she goes, Sissy's praying for me. I'm like, okay, yeah. I'm like, yeah, she's praying for you. I was like, how do you know that? She's like, Sissy's in heaven. She's praying for me. She's with Yeshua. And I thank you guys for coming and celebrating Talia's life. And when I say celebrating her life, like, to remember that she's an eternal being, she's still living. And so we can celebrate that. And we can hold our pain and our mourning and our grief and hold all of it as one. The last moments, we were kind of preparing. Like I said, our heart kept stopping and starting. And then it was just like they closed the doors and they're like, okay, you can be in here as long as you want and be with Talia. And we had about 5 minutes. I was just alone as she was starting to decrease. And we thought that's how it was going to end, but a doctor had come in and just came in and shut off the ventilator on us while her heart was still beating. And so then it was like this state of panic. And there was the last few minutes were me arguing with a doctor about turning on the ventilator and kind of getting into a fight about that. And it felt like like the most precious moments, the only moments. This is the first time that the first and only time we ever got to hold our daughter was when she died in our arms. And it felt like a sacred moment. It felt like it was getting stolen from us. And as she passed, I just heard, and I saw her running in a field with Yeshua, and she just looked back and she said, "Daddy, it's okay. Like, I love you." And I felt like she was telling me like you can't control this circumstance, but you can control your response, and I'm okay. And so that's what me and Megan are going to keep holding on to. I'm sure I was all over the place, and I appreciate you guys listening.
I raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies. I raise a hallelujah